Imagine driving along Route 66 on a cold night in the 1960s. The distant sound of a jukebox echoes somewhere between the wind and the desert. The soft glow of a red neon sign flickers on the facade of a small roadside motel. The sign still reads vacancy, but no one shows up to park. That blinking neon seems like the last sign of life for miles. The smell of hot asphalt mingles with sand and iron, and for a moment it feels as if time has truly stopped there. Today, almost all those motels have vanished, but a few still stand, forgotten by time, remembered only by those who once traveled that legendary highway. Route 66 was the heart of America. More than a road, it was a symbol of freedom. From Chicago to Los Angeles, it connected people, stories, and dreams. Every mile told a tale, and every motel was a stop along that journey. Entire families crossed the country in huge cars, children gazing out the window, parents smiling as the sun turned the horizon gold. It was an era of innocence and hope, a time when the journey mattered more than the destination. In 1955, the country breathed progress. Radios played Elvis, neon signs glowed in vibrant colors, and travelers felt part of something greater. In every small town, a new motel appeared, each promising comfort, hot coffee, and a soft bed after long hours on the road. The Blue Swallow Motel in New Mexico was one of the most famous. Its light blue walls reflected the passing car headlights, and its neon shone like a guiding star for weary drivers. Inside, the rooms had hand-painted murals and private garages. It was the kind of place where the owner knew every guest by name. A few miles away, the Wagon Wheel Motel served fresh pancakes at dawn. Children's laughter mixed with the sound of tires crunching on gravel. Families took pictures in front of their cars, believing those memories would last forever. And in a way, they did. But only in memory. When the new interstate highways began to rise, they promised a faster future, but they took away the charm of slow stops. Modernity came like a strong wind. Cities grew, roads multiplied, and little by little, the old Route 66 was left behind. Travelers chose shortcuts, and the flow that once sustained the small motels dried up. One by one, they closed their doors. Some owners held on for years, others walked away overnight. Today, driving through, you can still see the traces of that change. Broken signs, shattered windows, doors that creak as the wind passes through. There's a special kind of silence in those places, not empty but filled with memories. Those who approach feel something hard to explain, a mix of nostalgia and reverence. Time seems suspended, as if every speck of dust carries a story. The aged wood, the scent of rust, the distant hum of a truck on the highway, all part of a forgotten symphony. The old guests may not know it, but they left their marks. Scribbled messages on walls, notes tucked in drawers, photographs forgotten in locked cabinets. Every object tells a fragment of life. A lost ring, an old car key, a suitcase no one ever claimed. Anonymous memories of people who kept driving and never returned. As the sun sets over the desert, golden light touches the faded facades. The asphalt glimmers like a mirror of memories. In some spots, the old signs still blink faintly, as if trying to call travelers who no longer exist. And in that instant, the road speaks. It speaks of times when the world felt simpler, when hurry had not yet defeated the joy of slowing down. That is the soul of Route 66, a road that is not just a path but a living memory of who we were. Every curve holds an echo of the past, and every abandoned motel stands as a monument to what time has taken away. Driving there, it's impossible not to feel a twinge of melancholy, and at the same time a strange sense of peace. It's like stepping into an old photograph and realizing that even aged, it still holds the same beauty. And that's why we keep coming back. Because in a way, these forgotten places remind us of ourselves, of when we had time to watch the sunset, listen to the radio, and talk without rushing. The road is a metaphor for life, long, unpredictable, and full of stops we've left behind. As night falls, the wind changes tone. The last neon flickers out and silence takes over the desert. Only the sound of crickets and a distant truck engine break the darkness. The driver continues, perhaps unaware that he just passed one of the last fragments of a lost era. The blue glow of the Blue Swallow fades in the rearview mirror, and the highway becomes once again just a dark line beneath the starlit sky. But even when the last sign goes dark, Route 66 will remain alive, not on maps, but in the memory of those who believe every journey is a story. It is that memory that feeds the spirit of travelers and keeps the past breathing along the edge of the road. Dawn on Route 66 is unlike anywhere else. The light rises slowly, spreading copper tones across the hills and making the metal of abandoned cars gleam like aged gold. Between the wind and the distant cry of a crow, the desert awakens. The forgotten motels seem to breathe, exhaling the dust of decades past. Their windows still reflect the sky, and their tattered curtains move with the breeze, as if someone invisible still lived there. Time doesn't run here. It watches. For years, curious travelers have returned to the old road just to relive memories. Some seek the motels out of nostalgia, others out of mystery. There are those who say that at night you can hear voices coming from the empty rooms, children and laughter, old radios playing, echoes of interrupted conversations. Perhaps they're only illusions, but some believe the road keeps the energy of everyone who has ever passed through it. In the 1970s, motels tried to adapt. They painted new colors, hung new signs. But the world had already changed. Families preferred to fly, and truckers sought faster highways. Even so, some resisted, driven not by profit but by passion. In a small stretch of Arizona, a woman named Margaret kept the Sunset Motel open for nearly 40 years. She served coffee every morning even when there were no guests. She said she couldn't let the place die because it held the best memories of her and her husband's life. Margaret kept a guest book filled with hundreds of names. Each signature is a story, she'd say with a smile. By the late 90s, she no longer had the strength to care for the motel, but she still lit the neon sign every night. As long as this light shines, it's still alive. Today, the sign still stands, though only half of it works, part dark, part glowing, like the heart of the road itself. These stories repeat from state to state. In Texas, the Desert Rose Inn became a refuge for birds and dust. In Oklahoma, the Golden Rest was swallowed by weeds. In Kansas, the Starlight still endures, restored by volunteers who love the history of Route 66. They repainted the rooms, repaired the signs, and hung old photographs on the walls. We're not saving buildings, they say. We're saving memories. And indeed, that's what it's all about, memory. The road is an open-air museum where every crack in the asphalt tells something about the past. Those who drive there feel as though time turns back. It's easy to imagine smiling families in convertibles, children eating ice cream, truckers waving to each other. The sound of engines, the smell of gasoline, the warm wind on your face, all of it still lives, if only in memory. The modern tourist drives too fast. He snaps a photo and moves on. But those who stop for a few minutes notice something cameras can capture, the sweet melancholy of a time that won a return. The desert has that power. It reminds us that everything is fleeting. The forgotten motels, even in ruins, are silent witnesses to an era when travel was a celebration, not just a destination. It is curious to think that many of these places were built by simple people who believed in the future. Family men who laid bricks with their own hands, painted signs, served coffee, and welcomed strangers. Every brick holds a fragment of hope, and when you see these motels today covered in dust and silence, it's impossible not to feel respect. They didn't fail, they simply fulfilled their purpose and rested. Some say Route 66 is a ghost road. Maybe it is. But it's also a road of rediscovery. Those who return aren't just searching for ruins, they're searching for themselves. It's an act of remembrance, a way to reconnect with a time when life felt more human. The past doesn't disappear, it merely changes its address, and sometimes it lives in an empty motel room, waiting for someone to visit. The sunset begins to touch the mountains and the sky becomes a sea of orange and violet. The old posts cast long shadows and the asphalt seems to melt in the light. A solitary car crosses the road. The driver slows down as he spots the darkened sign of the Paradise Inn. He pulls over and steps out. The ground creaks beneath his feet. The windows are coated in sand, but inside there are still blue curtains and a clock stopped in 1963. The man runs his fingers along the wall and feels the rough texture of time. He takes a deep breath and smiles. Perhaps he doesn't know it, but in that instant, he repeats the same gesture as thousands before him, those who sought meaning in memories. And that's where the beauty of the road lies. It connects people who never met through the same feeling: nostalgia, longing, respect for what once was. If you've made it this far, it's because you feel it too. Maybe you've already driven that route, or maybe you just dream of taking the trip one day. Either way, you're part of this story. So before we continue, take this moment, and leave your like. Not as a simple gesture, but as a headlight signal between travelers on the same road. The 1980s marked the beginning of silence. Traffic dwindled, truckers followed new routes, and the few travelers who remained began to see Route 66 as nothing more than an old road, an unimportant shortcut. The neon signs that once lit up the night started to fail one by one, until only a few isolated glimmers remained on the horizon. The road that once symbolized freedom became a lonely line on the map, covered in dust and forgetfulness. The motels, once full of life, turned into melancholy ruins. Empty rooms still held the echoes of voices that once laughed there. Some owners resisted as long as they could, sleeping in cold rooms, lighting candles when the generator failed, staring at the highway hoping to see approaching headlights. But the headlights never came. The new America was somewhere else, in shopping malls, in cities, in the cell phones that were beginning to change the world. Those who drove the old Route 66 said it was like watching the past die slowly. Every motel that closed left a hole in the collective memory. There were too many stories inside those walls to fit into oblivion. One man, the owner of the Desert Mirage Inn, kept sweeping the sidewalk every day, even without guests. When asked why, he answered, "Because as long as I'm sweeping, there's still a chance someone might come back." The wind blew hard in that region. It carried the sound of doors slamming and curtains rustling. In some stretches, the asphalt began to crack and give way as nature reclaimed the land. Desert flowers sprouted in the middle of the road, and birds built nests in the signs. The forgotten highway, ironically, was returning to the earth. And in a way, it was as if time itself were restoring what man had once tried to make eternal. Even so, not everything was forgotten. Photographers, historians, and nostalgic travelers began rediscovering Route 66. They found beauty in decay, the shadows of buildings, the rusty hues, the broken neon lights. Everything looked like frozen poetry. Magazines and documentaries began to appear, portraying the abandoned motels as cultural relics. The road once again became the subject of songs, books, and films. Little by little, the world started to remember. Some of those travelers were young, children and grandchildren of those who had driven the road in the 1950s. They had heard their grandparents' stories and felt a deep desire to see what was left with their own eyes. They took cameras, backpacks, and old cars and set out in search of the past. What they found were ruins, but also peace. There was something sacred about the solitude of those structures. One of those young travelers, named Peter, decided to restore an abandoned motel in Texas. He spent months cleaning, painting, and putting the letters back on the sign. When he finally turned on the power, the neon light flickered to life for the first time in 40 years. He cried alone on the road. He said it wasn't just about the motel. It was about reclaiming a piece of America, Bear's soul. And from that solitary act, hundreds of similar initiatives were born. People began restoring sections of Route 66, rebuilding old buildings and sharing their stories online. Local communities noticed the movement. Small towns began to receive tourists again. Old shops reopened. Cafes started serving coffee once more. And some motels were reborn. Not as they once were, but now they were spaces of memory. Places where time itself is the true host. Today, many of those motels operate almost like museums. Rooms preserve original furniture, old photos, and even the scent of aged wood. The owners tell stories of when cars used to cross the road non-stop, of couples who left their wedding rings behind, truckers who carried flowers home, families who slept together in a small bed and woke up with sunlight streaming through the curtains. Yet even with this revival, a faint melancholy lingers. It's impossible to erase the weight of time. Every cracked brick, every faded wall is a reminder that nothing lasts forever. And still, it's that impermanence that makes everything so beautiful. The forgotten motels of Route 66 are like scars that tell stories of love, hope, and solitude. There is something profoundly human about such places. They remind us that we all leave traces, that one day we too will be dusty memories along some lonely road. Perhaps that's why so many people return, not just to see, but to feel. Because the silence of Route 66 speaks. And when it speaks, it's impossible not to listen. As the sun disappears on the horizon, the lights of night begin to appear. The sky turns violet, and the stars seem to fall onto the asphalt. The road shines once more, even if only by reflection. Somewhere, the sign of the Blue Swallow Motel blinks slowly, stubborn, alive, defying time. The distant sound of a jukebox seems to echo again, and for a moment, past and present blend together, and it's in that instant we understand. Route 66 never died. It only sleeps in fragments, waiting for someone to dream of it again. Every visitor, every curious glance reignites a fragment of its soul. It's as if the asphalt itself breathes once more. The wind blows, lifting dust and memories, and the road stretches out before your eyes. Long, ancient, and eternal. The beauty of Route 66 lies in what it represents. The human will to keep going, even when everything seems lost. Every abandoned motel is a reminder that time passes, but meaning remains. And perhaps deep down, that's what we were searching for when we revisit the past. Proof that despite oblivion, we are still here. Dawn arrives slowly over the American desert. The colors change, and the cold of night gives way to a golden light that touches the rusted roofs of old motels. The silence is broken only by the soft sound of the wind and the gentle rattle of the metal signs that still endure. Time passes, but these places seem not to care. They remain standing even if wounded, like old guardians of an era that refuses to die. Route 66 is not just a road. It's a symbol, a line that cuts through the heart of America, telling at every curve a story of dreams, departures, and returns. It speaks of a generation that believed in freedom, in the open road, in the promise of a better tomorrow. And even though the world has changed, that promise still echoes in the sound of the wind and the glow of the neon that insists on lighting up. Each forgotten motel is a page in this book that time nearly closed. Some endure amid abandonment, others have been reborn as living memories. There is a kind of magic in these places that modernity cannot erase. They are monuments without statues, temples of silence where the human soul reveals itself. Whoever walks through those corridors feels something different, a mixture of solitude and gratitude. It is impossible not to imagine the stories trapped within those walls. Couples who promised eternal love, families saying goodbye to a city, travelers dreaming of a fresh start. Time took everything, yet left the essence behind. The smell of wood, the creak of the floorboards, the wind slipping through the cracks, all of it still lingers there, waiting for someone to stop and listen. Today, many pass by too quickly. They look, take a photo, and move on. But those who linger a little longer understand that the road still speaks, even if only in whispers. It speaks about us, our urgencies, the things we've left behind, the promises we made and forgot. Route 66 is a mirror of time, and every forgotten motel is a reflection of what it means to be human, to exist, to fade, and somehow, to continue. And perhaps that's why these places touch those who visit them so deeply. Because deep down, everyone has a forgotten motel inside, a guarded memory, a love left in the past, a dream that never came true. The road reminds us that life is made of stops, and that their value lies precisely there, in the pauses, the encounters, the farewells. At dusk, the colors shift once again. The sky turns shades of orange and purple, and the neon of the Blue Swallow Motel lights up once more, stubborn as ever. The blue glow dances across the cracked asphalt, and the distant sound of an old engine blends with the breeze. It's as if time bends, and for a brief moment, everything becomes as it once was. The laughter of children, the sound of suitcases being dragged, the soft music of a forgotten radio. There is beauty in what time has tried to erase. And it's that beauty that keeps Route 66 alive. Not tourism, not restoration, but memory. It's the feeling it awakens in those who travel it. Because as long as someone is willing to remember, nothing is ever truly lost. If you've traveled this road, maybe you've felt it. Maybe you stopped before an abandoned motel and wondered who once slept there. Maybe you imagined how many stories were born and ended within those walls. And if you've never been there, perhaps now you feel the desire to go. Not just to see, but to feel. And that's why the Shadow of America channel exists. So that these stories do not disappear. So that the past continues to be remembered, not as something distant, but as a living part of who we are. America is built on memories, and every forgotten corner is a fragment of our story. If you enjoyed this video, like, comment, and share. Comment if you remember that time. If you've ever traveled Route 66 or if you dream of doing so one day. Comment if an image brought back memories, or if a phrase made you think of someone. Your comment helps keep this road alive. And every word you write is another light turned on along the way. Share this video with someone who loves the past, who misses simple and genuine things. Spread these memories so more people discover that time can stop, even if only for a few minutes of remembrance. And of course, subscribe to Shadow of America. Here, every week we return to America's forgotten roads, to abandoned towns, ruined cinemas, and bridges nearly claimed by time. Places where silence tells stories and memories never die. We'll see you on the next journey into the past, where America's forgotten places are never truly forgotten because they remain alive in our memories.